So, past Harry really loves to write checks that future Harry can't cash. So, for those of you who are just joining this series, first of all, why? There's an episode 1 that you can watch that better contextualizes this project. But assuming you have a bizarrely limited defiance of authority that makes you want to watch this series in a non-linear way, I'm in the middle of writing a CAPTCHA that's also an RPG. Essentially, I want it to be as mind-numbingly difficult as possible to try and replicate the CAPTCHA experience, but also to replicate the poorly balanced RPG experience, all in the web browser for reasons best known to myself. Last time I said I was going to try and have a demo done by the time this devlog went out. I'm sure you're wondering how that went, although maybe you're not, because I guess the title maybe has given the game away a little bit. So yeah, the game isn't finished. Turns out game development is way more complicated than I anticipated. You'd think I'd have figured out that game development is hard from having worked in the industry for oh man. I did make a lot of progress though, and I'd like to share what I've got. Beforehand though, did you know that only Steve is subscribed to the channel right now? I don't know why YouTube records subscriber data on quite this granular a level, but it is interesting to know, so yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is you should subscribe. I'll move on. What I learned in the last couple of weeks of work is that I absolutely have to stop making guarantees or promises about when things will be ready or what particular things are going to happen. Like that EGX thing, I don't even know where my head was at with that. On the other hand, it's not really the end of the world that it didn't pan out, because the primary objective was to like incentivize myself to work on it, and I did work on it. I also probably have to be a bit less hard on myself for the amount of progress I make, what with I already do a full job and have to have like a minimal amount of life or whatever. What I'm trying to say is that I'm basically a failure in every respect. Here's what I've done since the last time I talked about this game. I mentioned during the video where I sank a boat that I was injecting a bunch more capitalism into the game. And when I say capitalism, I mean basically everything I've added is like money related. The first thing is that the game now has a stock exchange in it. Basically, if you walk across the bridge on the right, which as an additional aside now actually does go somewhere, so that's progress, I guess. What was I talking about? I can't write the script right now. I'm gonna go take a nap. Okay, I've taken a nap since writing the last paragraph. What was the last thing we got up to? The stock exchange. If you walk across that bridge to the right, you'll end up in this clearing where there's a giant hole in the ground and a building with a sign on it. I'll address the giant hole in a minute, don't worry. Anyway, if you go into the building, there's just a guy, and the guy will sell you stocks and shares if you want. I got really excited about getting this mechanic to work, not necessarily because the system itself is particularly interesting, but more so because when you buy shares, this little pie chart pops up and shows you the proportions of all the individual shares as a percentage of your overall portfolio, but also it updates based on the value of your shares, and like, okay, I'm getting ahead of myself, I'll explain. So if you talk to the guy behind the counter, you can buy shares for a variable gold value. Once you've purchased them at face value, you can press the E key to cause time to pass. As time passes, the values of the stocks change as the invisible hand of the free market does whatever it does. I don't really understand how stocks work. The thing is, it completely randomizes what happens to them, because as I said, it isn't actually based on genuine maths or anything, because I don't understand finances. But this means that your investment can increase or decrease in value. In practice, your investment will just decrease because every company will eventually go bust because I coded it wrong. But let's paper over that because I'll fix it eventually. So yeah, that's the stock exchange. I don't think I explained it that well, I guess. I don't know, I'm having a weird day. You're probably also wondering what's up with the giant hole in the ground. Funnily enough, that's where the bank is. I put the bank in a hole in the ground. I can't remember what the narrative justification for the bank being in the ground is, but I had one at some point. I don't remember what it was, so I guess I don't anymore. If you go down the ladder, you end up in this hallway. When this is set up, you'll be able to do a few things. First, you'll be able to open a savings account, which will accrue value over time. You'll be able to take out a loan subject to status, or at least subject to completing a quest. And also, I have something to say about that too, so I'll get to that in a sec. And you'll be able to pay to fix the stock market if you broke it by fast forwarding time too much. Yes, that's a really lazy way to deal with my bad code, but I don't really care about anything. I need to take another nap. Okay, I've taken another nap. I'm really having trouble keeping this script straight, but we're gonna get there together. So the bank exists like geometrically, but that still needs implementing, and I'll get to it eventually. There's also gonna be a puzzle kind of deal and whatever here, and there's also a mystery object that I can't really go into a lot of detail without spoiling what it's all for, so that's sort of all you get of that. There's also quests in this game now. Well, there's two quests. Well, there's one, and I haven't got the other one working yet, and also the quest system isn't 100% working yet, and you also can't complete the first one yet because the first one relies on finishing the not working one for you to finish it. But you can get quests, and it has this UI, and you can see the current quests, so you've got in your menu and what the current objective is of the current quest and all the rest of it. The actual UI was fairly easy to to implement. The really difficult bit was coming up with content, and to that end, I've been writing a sort of strategy guide style creative brief document in Google Drive that's going to have all the details. I'm planning to release this eventually in a human readable format so that I can monetize how impossible it's going to be to complete the game without outside help. And while I again can't say too much without ruining the major narrative beats, I can say fairly confidently that the first half of the first vague act of the game is now in text in a Drive folder somewhere, assuming I don't make the game longer. I shouldn't make the game longer, there's only one of me and I'm already bad at sticking to the timeline, but what if I think of something really cool and decide I want to bolt on another 8 hours worth of implementation on the end of a project I'm going to forget about in a month's time? The me writing the script at 4 AM was cynical. So, okay, the stock exchange is working, the bank, exists, kind of, there are quests a bit, and I'm sure you're getting to the point now where you're like, okay, Harry, this is all fine, but none of this is particularly impressive. What happened with that battle system you kept saying you would make and then kept pawning off while you did other features that all ultimately rely on the core combat system being functional? And to you I say this, the battle system is pretty much all in now. In fact, it's the one part of this project I'm actually broadly pretty happy with. So, the prototypal version of this system that I wrote for the previous installment of the CAPTCHA series was not sensibly written, in so much as I tried to dump literally all of the battle system logic into one script. That's UI, damage calculation, initiative calculation, artificial intelligence, the works, all in one mammoth battle system script that I could barely read after the first 2 hours. And if I can't read it, I can't iterate on it, which is no good. So I took a deep breath and I deleted the whole thing. There's now a separate script, Battle System V2, which has a bunch of, let's call them child components, even though child technically means something else in game design parlance, but we're going to pretend it doesn't, otherwise I'll scream and howl. Those child components, separate scripts in a central battle system namespace, all handle the individual categories of actions that the system at large handled originally. So for instance, anything that involves calculation, that's calculating move order, whether or not one side or another is surprised, how much damage things do, that's all handled by the calculator. User interface stuff, there's a separate script for that. Turn management, script. Status messages, script. XP distribution, script. Oh, and while we're talking about XP distribution, good lord, I wish someone had told me how complicated figuring out XP balancing was before I decided the thing I should make was an RPG. I'd have made a visual novel. Hell, if I'd made a visual novel, I'd be done by now. But I'm in too deep at this point, so it's just gotta get done. I've been on a major Unity editor kick lately, and so I wrote this utility script that lets me adjust the values I've plugged into my XP equation, so that I can adjust how much XP is required to go between levels, as well as how quickly that value should increase over time, which is pretty neat. Being able to see the effects of my actions really helps me quantify how well it would work as a system. Anyway, that's all a lot of words to say the battle system is in, random encounters are working, and you can level up. I have a build where I set the values of the XP all screwy, so one time I spent about 30 minutes just farming slimes in this bit of the game, and I got to level 10 and was just killing everything in one hit. I need to work it out so that you get diminishing returns pretty fast, because really I only want you to be level 3 unless you spend a truly ungodly amount of time here. The first mini-boss, you're going to have someone with you, so you won't really need to be stronger than that to handle it. Oh, I wrote the first mini-boss, by the way. The funny mystery object is that's the mini-boss or whatever. I guess that's a spoiler that the first boss is in the bank. I don't know. Is it a comment on capitalism? Who cares? So there's a lot more I can say and a lot more I want to say, but this script is a nightmare as it is, and I think describing it all in more detail is maybe better suited to a sort of long-term writing project. Ironically enough, for someone who claims to do video editing regularly, I actually take in information way better from the written word, so it makes sense in my head. I'm thinking I'd like to try writing about the CAPTCHA game, a blog kind of deal. I'm gonna start that on my website, harrisongowland.co.uk/CAPTCHA, so that'll be up probably at the tail end of this weekend coming. I'll leave a pinned comment about it and link to it in the description when it's live. It won't be an every Friday or even every X day thing like the videos are, but just whenever I think of something to say while I'm working on this and want to share. By the way, if you want to know when I write them, follow me on Twitter. Now that I can stop worrying about hitting the arbitrary and probably unachievable deadline I set for myself, I can start to think about more fundamental design questions at a less than breakneck pace, and also occasionally make videos that aren't about this. Do you remember I was going to make a Crisis Command game? Man, those were the days, huh? I really got to bring that back. That video did pretty well, all things being equal. Also, I'd like to take this opportunity to apologize to the people of Colorado for disappearing their state the other day. I think that made a lot of people upset.